Welcome to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger, and on Press Coverage, I try to bring you the sharpest guests. I try to find you the actionable information that can help you win your fantasy leagues. And right now it's March, so we're a long ways away from redraft season, but we're having to adjust very quickly to this ever-changing free agent marketplace. This was about the craziest opening 24 hours that we have ever seen in NFL free agency in terms of fantasy football. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Alan Seslowsky of RotoWire. You know him. He's one of my co-hosts, along with the Podfather, for the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast. Alan is one of the hardest working people in fantasy football. We've been talking on the phone about these free agent, signings, and I'm like, Alan, let's just get on a pod. So Alan's like all about that life. So here we are, just diving into it. Minimal show sheet, Alan. I know you hate show sheets. So how excited are you for this?
I don't hate show sheet. When you talk about and you're getting into the how the sausage is made, I think like it sometimes it could handicap you rather than help you. People could use a guide as a crutch. It's good to be planned out, but at the same time, you're so good off the cuff. I think for someone like you, it actually hurts you because you can go anywhere and because you have this expansive knowledge of all things in football.
You know, a basketball analogy would be like I'm an incredible ball handler and shooter and really create my own shot kind of guy. And I need to be in a 1-4 offense where everybody just clears out of the way, maybe an occasional high pick and roll. And then you stick me into like a flex offense where I'm getting down screens and I'm having to set screens and I'm all messed up, Alan.
Did you see the Lakers show on HBO? The one where Paul Westhead was trying to put his stupid offense in there and just not let Showtime Lakers do their thing.
It's a very good show. I'm not fully caught up. I understand this was a good season. I understand they stopped doing the show though, Alan. They're not going to renew it.
Not only did they stop doing the show, they told the production team in the middle of shooting it, so they had to quick come up with an ending when they were already 8 episodes in. Yes, correct, because it was too expensive, the show.
Occasionally, HBO shuts down a show before I'd like them to. I don't know if anybody's ever seen How to Make It in America, but I thought that show had potential. It only had 2 seasons. So Deadwood, a lot of people, wanted more out of Deadwood. So they don't get them all right, Alan, but not like the good old days with Sopranos and The Wire. But I'd love to talk shows with you for 45 minutes. I think that would be like must listen to, must see. But we got to dive into the free agents. We are recording this today on Tuesday. So the most recent signing is one of arguably the most exciting signings. This is one that we've kind of prepared ourselves for mentally, but now we get to see it. Derrick Henry signs a 2-year deal with the Baltimore Ravens. Derrick Henry steps immediately into like a Gus, I can't believe I'm saying it, the Gus Edwards plus role that was so strong last year in Baltimore. This is the best offense that Derrick Henry's ever played in his entire NFL career. This is the best quarterback that Derrick Henry's ever played next to in his NFL career in Lamar Jackson. Where are you at on this signing? What does this do for you with Derrick Henry?
I'm going to give you the core argument on both sides, and then let's come up with this together, right? I would say that my brain went right to this as a downgrade because Lamar Jackson on the goal line. I know he's not Lamar Jackson's not 10 touchdowns on the goal line, but he's going to get more than any other standard quarterback would, a Will Levis or Ryan Tannehill. But the more touchdowns, better offense is the other side of that pole, right? So he's going to be on a better offense, but with a more dynamic quarterback. So I would say it's kind of a lateral move. I think that the touchdown upside, I don't know, man. Like, it doesn't change my opinion of Derrick Henry. It just puts him at least like on solid ground. And then you look at the contract, Theo, a fake 2-year contract with 1 year guaranteed. So we know for 2024, I was looking down the rankings, man. Like, I'm going to be more bullish on him than the market is, but I'm always more bullish on Derrick Henry than the market is. RB15 is probably where he's going to land.
And RB15 is where he's at on Underdog. So we're going to reference a little bit of this Underdog. We might as well just throw it on the screen right now. So right now you see Derrick Henry as RB15. He's right behind Kenneth Walker and right ahead of Aaron Jones, another player we're going to discuss shortly. Do you think that kind of makes sense for you, Alan? I'll throw out a couple names also ahead of him. Isaiah Pacheco, Rachaad White, Josh Jacobs, who we're going to discuss. And then behind him is also Alvin Kamara. That seems about right for you?
Yeah, well, no, but I told you I'm always going to be more bullish on Derrick Henry because Derrick Henry to me is the defies age guy. Like he's a player that can win you a league. And now, if you believe that this is a boon for him, a boost for him, like even though I don't have to, I would probably have him somewhere. Like I would rather have him than Achan, right? Just because.
Oh, come on.
Well, I'll tell you why. Just durable. He's going to be there for you every week. Achan, he has that nuclear upside, and the game of best ball is a little different. But I know, I told you, I'm going to be way ahead of him. I'm going to have him ahead of James Cook in my rankings, right? I'm going to have him as the RB 8, 9, or 10, Derrick Henry. But again, if you could take him, if you're picking on a turn, Theo, you don't have to take it. You can play a little chicken with him, right?
Well, I think what's interesting to me is we haven't seen a running back have that sort of incredible fantasy season next to Lamar Jackson really since the Mark Ingram year, which was, I believe, 2019. So 2019, we saw Mark Ingram come over from New Orleans, a similar type move to this, supposedly on the tail end of his career, and then has a sort of a career renaissance next to Lamar Jackson in that offense. The potential touchdown equity for Derrick Henry in Baltimore, despite playing next to Lamar Jackson, is huge. If we simply give him the Gus Edwards role with a little bit more, then I think we're wheels up. The Tennessee offense was one that we could have really seen struggle. I know that Callahan gave, a lot of talk into, hey, we could bring back Derrick Henry, but they signed Tony Pollard basically from the jump, and it was never really going to happen. So instead of being in a situation where he's next to a pretty exciting back in Tyjae Spears, he's now next to a injured Keaton Mitchell, and I'm not even sure that's going to be the backup running back on day one for Baltimore. So I think this is, for me, I agree with you. I'm going to have a good amount of Derrick Henry. I'm excited about this signing. I think it makes the Ravens offense better. This could be one of the best offenses in football next year. It was this year, and I think it's also a reactionary signing. They ended the season in very disappointing manner, where Todd Monken took a lot of heat for the way that they attacked Kansas City. They got away from the ground game. Now they get a player who has continually commanded carries in his career. So I'm with you, Alan. Like, I like this one. I think I'm a little bit higher than RB15 along with you. I'm not quite at take him over Devon Achane level, but I think he offers a lot for sure.
Yeah, Achan, the reason is just he hasn't proven he can stay healthy and where you have to take him. But that's no here nor there. Remember also, you referenced the Mark Ingram season. I love that. Another one was, do you remember the way J.K. Dobbins ended his season a couple years ago, his last healthy season?
Yes, absolutely. 2022, J.K. Dobbins had 300-yard games. He had that really big playoff game when they nearly upset Cincinnati without Lamar Jackson. It's funny, Alan. My wife asked me to do something and I'll forget. But when you reference some, playoff run from 2 years ago, it's like the back of my head. I love it.
Exactly. It's the same reason you could still remember your childhood phone number, right? I guarantee you could, you could rip it off. Certain things store in certain part of the brains, other things, they come in and out. The brain, it's amazing how it compartmentalizes that stuff. Now, the other thing we've seen is that the Ravens have gotten derailed by running back injuries multiple years in a row. Derrick Henry is certainly going to be the linchpin of their backfield, but I wouldn't be surprised if they add some other players in there that are still available in the next waves of free. No one that's going to threaten him, but I mean, couldn't you easily see them, Deontay Foreman, right? Kareem Hunt, AJ Dillon, who's going to be out there looking for a league min deal. Now, again, none of these, this is what you want, right? You just want, but there's going to be other players between him and Keaton Mitchell. So, maybe the RB15 is a sober ranking of him but when you're playing, when you talk about the upside of Derrick Henry, and to me, he still looks like he hasn't lost a step. Theo, we've had Derrick Henry's high school coach on the RotoWire podcast, and famously, he used to give him 50, 55 carries in a game, and I said, did the parents complain? Is that child abuse? And he would say, I tried to take the ball out of his hand. The guy would put his chest in my face and say, if you don't give me the ball, we're fighting.
I love that. And a shout out to that high school coach for using him as a running back. It would be so easy to kind of get away from that based on his size and the athleticism he has. But,
Bobby Ramsey is the guy's name. Bobby Ramsey. And by the way, Bobby Ramsey, not only did he coach Derrick Henry Yulee, he also was Carson Beck's coach his senior year. And Beck is projected to be the 101 in next year's draft, or 102.
I love it. The guy's turning him out. So for this next player, for Derrick Henry, we referenced the running back rankings, but for this next player, Alan, I think we've got to go with the overall rankings, and that's Saquon Barkley. And this is a player this is one of the most exciting free agent signings ever at the running back position. You get Saquon Barkley leaving New York, going to play in Philadelphia. There's people that are going to poke holes in this, and we certainly did. We talked about this, where he loses some target ceiling playing next to Jalen Hurts. You disagreed with this one, but this is one of the arguments out there where he's not going to be utilized as a pass catcher quite as much as he could have been on other teams. He also, playing next to Jalen Hurts, potentially loses a few vultured touchdowns. Jalen Hurts is one of the most effective quarterbacks right around the goal line. But when it comes down to it, it's way more positives than negatives. He goes to the best offense Saquon Barkley's ever played in will be this season in Philadelphia, with Kellen Moore running the show, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, a very good offensive line, Dallas Goedert at tight end. This is about as complete an offense as you could ask for. And there's some wild scenarios going around in my mind, like Saquon Barkley gets 15 touchdowns this year.
Yeah.
Where are you at on this, Alan? How high up are you willing to steam Saquon Barkley in the overall underdog rankings? Before he signed, just to give you a quick update of where he's at. Where is Saquon right
He's
here?
20th overall.
20th overall, correct?
Mm-hmm. RB right now.
Yep. So he's right behind Josh Allen, right ahead of Devontae Adams. And the resistance point would be like Marvin Harrison Jr., Devon Achane, DJ Moore, Nico Collins, Jonathan Taylor. Are any of those players stopping you from steaming him up in the rankings?
Yeah, I mean, I would take him over Jahmyr Gibbs, in redraft, right? I mean, Saquon Barkley is the locked-in workhorse. What was the biggest complaint we had about Saquon Barkley? Is that he would get hit in the backfield every play and have to turn that into a 4-yard gain. He would have a lot of plays for losses, but he would just break, and he could do everything, by the way. And he's still in the peak of his powers. He's age 27 maybe when the season starts, something like that. And he's had low mileage. The downside here, the thing I wanted to really ask you about here, does this hurt Jalen Hurts, right? We're talking about tush-push touchdowns. Now, they lose Jason Kelce, so that hurts tush-push. And, and now you have a running back that you brought in, paid money to score touchdowns. Maybe that was part of the plan. They know they're going to run off tackle a little bit more and not do the tush-push as much, maybe instead of twice a game or 1.5 times per game, it's 0.8 times per game. So now you're adding another touchdown every 2 games to Barkley. Like, you outlined perfectly all the reasons this pushes Barkley up. Now, here's the fantasy football takeaway. If you're picking in the second half of the first round of a redraft league in the NFFC, FFPC, and you don't want to take a wide receiver, Saquon Barkley's in play at any time you want at the second half of that first round.
Yeah, I think he'll settle into the 1-2 turn. I don't know about him passing Jahmyr Gibbs by, but I think that this running back group right now, nobody kind of knows what to do after RB4. It's Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs. I think you're right, Alan. I think when it's all said and done, Saquon settles into where the Kyren Williams and Jonathan Taylors are being drafted, maybe a little bit ahead of those guys. And Saquon does settle in as RB5. With Jahmyr Gibbs, you get the immense receiving upside. The fact that he gave you 250 PPR points last year, there's still going to be guys that want to avoid, you say 27. He's still a little bit older. The kind of the unknown upside that Jahmyr Gibbs presents, I think he'll remain right ahead of Barkley. But right now we see Kyren going at 13 overall. I think that Saquon's going to be right there. I think 1-2 turn is where he's going to end up at.
Yeah. Here's what we know about those 3 players you just outlined. Jahmyr Gibbs is 100% going to be sharing the ball with David Montgomery, who is presumably their, quote, hammer, their thunderback, right? So Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have those explosive games. Barkley's going to have more consistency as far as opportunity week to week. And Kyren Williams, you're just trying to dodge bullets here. I believe in Kyren Williams. I know you do too. But at any moment, that just feels like it could fall apart, right? Just like Cam Akers did last year.
Yeah, I mean,
for different reasons.
And also, I'll throw this out just because we're looking at underdog, is the ability to stack also falls into people's minds. Like adding Saquon Barkley into some mega Eagles stack, you could basically start your draft with AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, and maybe Devonta Smith in there too, because Hurts and Smith are kind of living right around that 3-4 turn. It's going to hurt one of the Philadelphia Eagles. It could be Hurts. Hurts also could make up for it with his efficiency in a better offense. The chances of all four of those players returning ADP value based on where they're being drafted is slim. It could happen, but you also factor in the fact that Dallas Goedert's going right around, the end of the tight end 1 line. So they have basically 5 players being drafted inside of the top 12 of their position. Devonta Smith, again, he's a wide receiver 2 this year. He's a little bit adjusted, but that I do worry about. I think that's another show. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to discuss DeAndre Swift. We're going to discuss Tony Pollard. We're going to discuss Joe Mixon. We're going to discuss this wild NFL free agency early period. And hey, when we're on an ad, we might have to react to another signing because they keep coming. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Player Profiler, the Dynasty Deluxe package. The rankings are the best in the industry. It includes strategy mode where you can say, hey, change the rankings to be win now. Oh, change the rankings to be productive struggle. There's also a draft planner to help to strategize where you should take players because the draft planner also includes ADP. There's a trade finder where we look up on My Fantasy League and we see trades that are done, including a particular player. Then there's a trade analyzer where you can plug in draft picks, players, and we assign a lifetime value to draft picks out 5 years. The best thing about our trade analyzer, it can't be gamed with volume. And there's mock draft data to see right now what's the market for player X versus player Y, including in the fall when very few mock drafts are happening. And our Dynasty guide, the Dynasty Dominator, would cost you $10 on Amazon, but you get it for free with Dynasty Deluxe, and you get our rookie guide for free, a $25 value. So you get all of that for $45. I mean, it's a great deal.
Welcome back to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger, joined by Alan Seslowsky of RotoWire, discussing the fallout from NFL free agency. And one player that I didn't if we were planning this a week ago, Alan, and we were trying to prepare a show sheet, one guy that might not have shown up on the show sheet is Zach Moss. Zach Moss had an interesting career. He saw an initial dynasty bump when he lands as a Buffalo Bill early on in his career as a rookie. Never quite panned out, ends up conceding the job to Devin Singletary, bounces around, ends up in Indianapolis last year sort of as an afterthought, and then becomes one of the waiver wire ads of the year. Had a number of highly impactful games, showed two-way ability, set a number of career highs last year in Indy, ends up looking like the market valued him pretty highly. Signs with Cincinnati, but then we find out that Dallas was very interested in Zach Moss. You can't even imagine the sort of rocket ship ADP he would have seen if he jumped into that Dallas job. Now he joins a Cincinnati backfield where it's him, it's Chase Brown, a player who I'm pretty excited about, and then Travion Williams re-signed. Our friend Scott Connor, I saw him tweeting with Derrick Brown about this. Derrick Brown said this is a place that's going to draft a rookie running back. Scott said they're not going to take one until the 6th or 7th round. This is their backfield. Zach Moss and Chase Brown. So my first question to you is, if you could draft one Cincinnati running back right now for your 2024 season, is it Zach Moss or is it Chase Brown?
Yeah, the answer is Zach Moss because he's already done it, right? He was like RB8 for a good 2 months of the season. He's not a great running back, but he's a very good running back, and very good running back on a very good offense means fantasy production, right? I think that the floor for him is what Joe Mixon did last year at this point, and the ceiling is what Zach Moss did last year, right? Which was basically RB1 for a good chunk of the season. Now, if you take Zach Moss in the 7th round, 9th round, wherever he settles in, Theo, I have no delusions that that's not going to be like a season-long pick at some point, either by injury or it just flames out. But in our fantasy leagues, our seasonal leagues, we want to start strong. If you're a team in a dynasty league that went 0 RB, Zach Moss is a very reasonable target. I have Zach Moss on a bunch of teams. If someone wanted to buy him right now for like 2.1, like basically a quasi first round rookie pick, those are the type of conversations you should be having. That's why you load up on these picks, right, Theo? So I think that the short answer is you want Zach Moss. I love your call on Chase Brown, but the market's not going to value him. He's going to be, like a very niche sort of insider pick in the double digit rounds.
Well, call me Mr. Niche, because I'm into Chase Brown right now, Alan. I think the one thing about Zach Moss is, could this be indicative of a real split? Could this be the kind of the way that Cincinnati goes, where Zach Moss gets the goal line work, but Chase Brown gets those high value touches that we saw a lot of these running backs last year kind of excel with? Chase Brown is really, really good at catching the football, and Zach Moss had some games where he caught the ball well last year, but he's never had more than 27 receptions in an NFL season. I also think this is a backfield that both players are going to sort of cannibalize one another in ADP. Neither one of them is going to steam up. You bring up Zach Moss being drafted in like the 8th round. I think there's a chance it's like an eighth rounder and a 9th rounder, and people just can't figure out the backfield. It's one of those ambiguous backfields where we've seen a lot of fantasy value from because we don't have to spend anything on. In early best balls right now, I think there's something to drafting both of these guys and just double dipping into the Cincinnati backfield, because I do think, like, I agree with you, it's a really good offense. Would you agree with that?
Yes, very similar to what happened with the Rams backfield last year, right? Everyone was taking Cam Akers in the 5th, 6th round, right? Oh my God, what a value. No one even thought of Kyren Williams. Basically, if you were optimistic about Kyren Williams, it was similar to how you're talking about Chase Brown right now. Chase Brown could be the next Kyren Williams. Why not, right? Good offense if Joe Burrow stays healthy. So I think that's a great play. Get them both. I'm going to have a little bit of each. But like you asked me, like, which one do I want? I'm always trying to get off to like a 3-1 start in my fantasy leagues, because, man, if you start going to 2-4, it's so tough to, like, you always get leveraged on these trades. But yeah, ambiguous. I mean, this is like standard fantasy advice right now. Ambiguous backfield, take the cheaper one, right? I mean, that's we go with that
for sure. And we've had 24 hours to we were live on the air of the Sonic Truth podcast. And if you saw that, that's on YouTube now. It's going to drop as a podcast soon this week. But we were live on the air with Cody Carpenter. The Podfather's out of town this week. And we reacted live to the DeAndre Swift signing. And we were all sort of bullish about this. You've had time to think about this one. How are you feeling today about DeAndre Swift's prospects for 2024 in a new offense that just paid him a lot of money?
Yeah. I mean, he's still in a committee of 3, right? At least.
Is he? Yeah. I hear that argument, and I'm like, if I want to be, if Chicago truly viewed this as a committee, then why would they put that sort of money into it, Alan? You could go a lot cheaper than DeAndre Swift if you wanted to guarantee Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert their clear-cut roles. I think, to me, this is we are looking to improve upon Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert. He's certainly the most well-rounded of the two. Yep. He's a better receiver than Roschon Johnson, who is, by all accounts, a good receiver. And Khalil Herbert has a kind of a one-trick pony in terms of he's a runner, not a receiver. And I would argue that DeAndre Swift is just as effective as a runner as Khalil Herbert. So he's the most well-rounded running back there. He's been the most successful fantasy producer throughout his career. He's 25 years old. This is a guy that we've seen have a 60-catch season in Detroit, had a 1,000-yard rushing season in Philadelphia last year, and now gets this huge contract. I don't think we should let Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert affect our like decision-making of where we value DeAndre Swift.
Here's the other part of that. Marshawn Lloyd, who was Caleb Williams' primary running back last year, only 13 receptions. Is that a function of Lloyd doesn't catch the ball, Theo, or is that a function that Caleb doesn't like to dump off? Because I think that if you are bullish on DeAndre Swift, which is very good reason to be, you want the rookie quarterback. You know, you got to bake in that 50 reception base for him. And if DeAndre Swift ever gets to 75 receptions, I mean, that's just obviously first round value right there. So what is it, to the best of your knowledge, with Lloyd and USC and Caleb Williams from last year?
Well, it was Lloyd's first year on USC. He transferred from South Carolina. I think Lloyd's a guy that we both like as a prospect and a guy that we think can be a successful back catching the ball in the NFL level. but that wasn't something that was asked of him. And when it comes down to Caleb Williams, I don't buy into the notion that he can't check down, that he's going to be unwilling to check down. I think this is a player that can very much exist in any NFL system. Super talented player. And I think that we've seen time and time again that these young quarterbacks benefit from having reliable weapons that they can lean on. And I think at the end of the day, if DeAndre Swift is going to be next to him in the backfield, there's going to be targets for him. Last year, we saw the least amount of targets in DeAndre Swift's career in Philadelphia. I think there's no chance that he hits that number. I think that whole argument that, like, we don't know what Caleb Williams is going to do as an NFL player. I don't think there's a direct correlation between how you utilize your running back out of the backfield. Cam Newton certainly was not a guy that checked down at Auburn, and he had no problem finding Christian McCaffrey. Time and time again, we can point at some of these quarterbacks who didn't necessarily use running backs out of the backfield in college and then did use them in the NFL level.
The only eerie narrative street thing here is DeAndre Swift, the contract, the optimism reminds me a lot of Miles Sanders last year.
Sure.
Right. And then obviously, Miles, Carolina had the number one pick. Chicago has the number one pick. I mean, there's a lot of, non-data analytical things here. So yeah, I like DeAndre Swift, but maybe the market is they're going to play some the same place they did Sanders last year. I thought Miles Sanders I was yelling that he was probably the best running back pick you can make in last July. Right. And then obviously it ended up being one of the worst picks you can make. So Swift, we've seen him do probably, fail expectations, but still be good. He'll probably be appropriately priced in the 5th or 6th round if you went 3 receivers and a tight end. So it could go either way, man. But yeah, I would bet yes on this one.
I have been drafting a ton of DeAndre Swift before the signing. He was at running back 32 on Underdog, right around that RB 32 range. So he didn't really cost you anything. Now, where do you think he's going to settle in? Let's get in our time machines and let's fast forward to August 31st. Where is DeAndre Swift end up being drafted in ADP in a redraft league?
Yeah, in a redraft league, I think he'll fall. Like, people are going to start making decisions on him like around anywhere from like RB 11 to 15. We talked about Derrick Henry earlier, right? You're going to be so. Ken Walker, Isaiah Pacheco, those names will probably be more desirable than him. But right now, he might sit in a tier all by himself among like well above the David Montgomerys and the Ramondre Stevenson. So I would guess he's probably somewhere aggressively RB 12 and pessimistically floor wise, like RB 17. 6th round, 5th round would be my guess for teams that went hard to the hole on pass catchers.
I think as the enthusiasm grows for the Chicago offense, we'll see DeAndre Swift end up in like the 4 or 5 turn. Just my prediction. And I think that there's a chance that they move on from Khalil Herbert. I've seen a lot of people pushing back on that, saying Khalil has a very team-friendly deal and he offers them, that sort of depth. But I do think there'll be a secondary market for Khalil Herbert. And if Chicago sees that there's a trade available to them, I don't see why they're going to hold on to him. I think Roschon is a guy that is a more like-for-like replacement with DeAndre Swift, where, the backup running back does a lot of the same things in terms of we want to target the running back position. We can also use Roschon Johnson in that regard. One player that I think is interesting, Alan, is it seems like the New York Giants had their contingency plan pretty much figured out. They lose Saquon Barkley, and then within 2 hours, they announced the signing of Devin Singletary. It's the Brian Daboll, Devin Singletary reunion that no one asked for, but we are here. New York has nothing on offense, nothing. And they're going to look a lot different after the NFL draft. I think that there's a chance that they draft a quarterback. There's a chance that they draft a Malik Neighbors or a Rome Odunze, whatever. Right now, Devin Singletary might be the most reliable weapon on the New York Giants offense. Do you agree with that comment?
And remember, if Singletary is going to be like this year's Brian Robinson, like a boring pick that no one wants to make, that you're happy to have him on your roster. And Theo, remember the Giants yesterday traded away that 2nd round pick, which could have been a rookie running back. They traded away for Brian Burns, right? I mean, the defensive player to Carolina. So now Carolina's picking twice in the top 10 picks or whatever it is. But so Devin Singletary, I mean, the Giants are probably trying to figure out what they have. He's a trusted player. He's going to be like the perfect RB2, and no one's going to want him, right? He's going to be a pick that you hate making, that you're just taking him because he's there. His ADP will not rise, but yeah, he'll have weeks, right? And it all depending if Daniel Jones is able to play like he was 2 years ago versus last year before he got hurt. So he's going to be a boring pick. Nobody wants him. And those are the type of guys that I usually make a living on in fantasy. I'll be good with him in the 8th, 10th round, somewhere there.
Yeah, it's funny, Alan. I think you're onto something. I think Devin Singletary is actually a dirt cheap dynasty buy right now too. Of course, he saw a little bit of a improvement in the market because he's got a starting role, but people are going to be avoiding Giants like you wouldn't even believe this offseason. The only exception would be if one of those two rookies lands there, those wide receivers, people are going to see it as a spot where they can get 140, 150 targets. So they'll be into that. But Devin Singletary, no one's going to want any piece of that. And what's interesting is Singletary can also, it's one of these guys that like the PFFs never like him as a receiver. They'll say he's like an inefficient receiver, but he sure does pretty well in the NFL throughout his career when he gets targets. And I think that Giants offense is going to use him pretty similarly to Saquon Barkley. So it's gross to even talk about it, but Devin Singletary, I think you're right, Alan. That's going to be like that value guy that you can draft as like RB32. No one's going to care about. And he'll be the kind of guy you can plug in and get your 12 points per game every week.
Yeah. A nice life preserver in the ocean if you get lost at running back in your drafts this summer.
I love that. That's like a haiku right there. It's beautiful, beautiful prose. Let's talk about another running back that is one that I didn't anticipate we would be discussing in the early free agent market, but we see a Harbaugh to Harbaugh trade. Gus Edwards goes to the Los Angeles Chargers and reunites with Greg Roman, who he's played under for a good portion of his career, and plays for another Harbaugh. Where are we at on the Gus bus? This seems like a guy who is sort of a placeholder or a committee back for a rookie that they are going to draft. Where are you at on this?
2 years, $6.5 million. So it's like normal running back money, three per year. It's not so much like what I think about Gus Edwards, because right, Gus Edwards is going to remain cheap, right? Doesn't matter who they add. If they add Bucky Irving, we keep using him because he's a pass catching running back that'll go on day 3, presumably. They still have Isaiah Spiller there, hasn't proven anything. Josh Kelly, from best of my knowledge, is still hanging around there. So Gus Edwards, I hear you. Well,
those guys. I feel like all of the returning offensive players, the Harbaugh doesn't care about. I think it's like he signs Will Dissly, who we're not going to spend any time on Will Dissly. Don't worry, everybody. But he signs Will Dissly and he signs Gus Edwards. They're gonna look a lot different. It's Justin Herbert and then a bunch of new guys and probably Keenan Allen.
And they think there's rumors that they're thinking about trading Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, right? I mean, this could be a totally, like, you walk into the house and there's a fresh coat of paint that you're like, wait a second, this looks completely different here. The question is, it's not about Gus Edwards. Is that as they line this up to go a little bit more run heavy, are you at all worried about Justin Herbert not being QB even 8? Is he going to possibly drop to like the QB 12 and some of these like guys that we don't like that might have a little bit more mobility move past him? Are you, Austin Eckler was good for Justin Herbert in a sense when he was performing well, that he at least had a credible threat back there. If Justin Herbert's not even going to get more than a couple rushing touchdowns either, and going to give it to the Gus bus, this makes me more worried about him. Like you said, I want to see what they do with that early pick. Do they if it ends up being offensive line, Theo, right? Let's say they draft Joe Alt. Now you brought in Gus Bus. You have Will Dissly. We're not sure about the receivers. This would make me a little bit more dubious about Herbert.
I'm very dubious about Herbert. I do think that there's an argument that Greg Roman comes back. He's got this sort of bad reputation from his previous years in Baltimore, but this is a guy that ran an efficient NFL offense. But one thing time and time again with Harbaugh is they're going to run the football, and they're going to run the football a lot. I think he wants that to be a lot of their identity. The Gus Edwards signing, Will Dissly signing, you bring up the fact that they might go offensive tackle when the entire fantasy football world is begging them to take Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze or Marvin Harrison Jr. at the 5th overall pick. I'll say I agree with you. Justin Herbert's not a guy that I see myself drafting a lot of, And I'll say I'm doing a lot of early underdog drafts. Alan, you're absolutely right. Justin Herbert is QB 12. Of course, Justin Fields is QB 11. That's going to obviously change, but there is no chance I would take Justin Herbert over the Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, Kyler Murray trio that's going 8, 9, 10. And then when you look below Justin Herbert, I would absolutely prefer Brock Purdy, who's going one spot behind him at QB 13. And then when you go a little bit lower down the ranks, I would be more interested in Trevor Lawrence, who's quarterback 15, Goff, quarterback 17. And then, Alan, I'm more interested, without knowing the landing spot, to take Caleb Williams at QB 16 and Jaden Daniels at QB 18. And then we'll add into it. We're going to talk about him in a second, but Kirk Cousins, QB 19. I'm into all of those guys over Herbert right now. I think Herbert belongs down in that QB 18 range, despite his immense talent. It's the style of the offense, the question marks we have at the wide receiver position, and it's just too many question marks for me.
Yeah, I mean, but it's baked in, right? If he's already QB 12, then it's baked in. There's no value to be had by fading him at that point, right? Once he falls into that range, that QB 13 range, then actually we want him because he's just such a good player. I didn't realize he was that low already. It's so funny. I do underdogs every week. I took like a week and a half off, and it just the ADP changes so much this time of year. And again, I don't want to tangent off, but I just saw Deshaun Watson, QB 23. Man, he's going to be on a lot of my teams if he's that low.
Okay, so let's talk about, we saw the Tony Pollard signs with Tennessee, and that obviously hurts Tyjae Spears. And I love Tyjae Spears' talent too. And I see a lot of people kind of digging their heels in, saying this doesn't do anything. You know, they get Tony Pollard, and this is a guy that Tyjae Spears is just flat out better than. But Tony Pollard's a guy that can catch the football. Had 50-plus receptions last year. If anything, he sort of caps Tyjae Spears's ceiling as a receiver out of the backfield. Would you agree on that? What's your take on this situation?
I think what's the biggest knock on Tyjae Spears? It's not his talent; it's his durability, right? Yeah. So
there's no ACL.
No ACL. It's like the car that's running on fumes that could break, the sports car that could break down anytime. I like the Pollard Spears pairing because my guess is they're going to go back to back in ADP. You just pick which one you want. When you're on the clock, I can't give you the right advice. I would take Spears because maybe there's more theoretical upside. But look, there's no workhorse running backs other than a handful of these guys. So when you get to this point, you're right. The upside will probably be capped week to week, but there's going to be weeks where one of them goes off. You could easily see them rotating series. This is normal. I think that Pollard having Tony Pollard there, who's been fine in the NFL, right? Disappointed for fantasy last year. That just doesn't really change my opinion on either one of these guys. It's like, okay, fine. They got two running backs that kind of profile the same way, and they're going to be fill-in guys. If you were taking them in the 5th round of best ball drafts before this, sure, maybe you're going to lose a round and a half of value. But both of these guys are going to go in the 6th or 7th round, probably back-to-back.
Yeah, interesting one. It certainly is a really kind of a depressing outcome for Tyjae Spears early drafters, Alan, because you are going to see Tyjae Spears drop from he was up to RB 17 on Underdog. Yeah. Got to think he's going to be right around RB 30 range, RB 32.
Oh, no way. Come on, Theo. You think you'd rather have Austin Eckler over him or Najee Harris?
No. And maybe I'm a little off on this, but I think here's the whole argument. So the Tennessee Titans offense, we would both agree, is going to be bottom 10 in the NFL next year.
I mean, it's probably going to be projected that way, but who knows, right? Yeah. I mean, but yes, projected that way, bottom third.
Bottom half.
Third.
Bottom
yeah.
half. Okay.
Bottom half.
Bottom
third.
Sure. Bottom half. I think they're going to be bottom third. I think that's pretty safe. It's Will Levis year 2. A lot of change in the offense. They're not the sort of offense that I think is going to be able to produce 2 running backs in a split backfield. And I think it's going to end up with guys that are going to kind of be on our fantasy benches instead of guys we can bank on as a starter. Now, if one guy goes down, it's wheels up for the other one. And I do think that both these guys have high receiving, profiles. So it's not a backfield I'm completely going to avoid, but I don't think the market's going to be especially bullish on Spears right now, Alan, despite the talent.
Well, okay, so very similar in a sense, but a way worse offense, the Cincinnati situation. Would you were talking about Chase Brown, who's right around RB 32. Would you rather have Spears or Chase Brown?
Chase Brown. I would rather have Chase Brown today than Tyjae Spears.
Okay, well then you are absolutely right that he will be in that RB 35 range. I mean, that's, when you talk, it's very interesting because that tier of like RB 18 to 35, it really doesn't matter because they all have a similar chance to succeed or fail just for different reasons. Spears because it's a bad offense. Chase Brown because he's sharing. Nick Chubb because he's coming off an injury. Jaylen Warren because he's, it's like you go back and forth. It's like at some point there's always this in fantasy football, and you experience this because you play in a ton of redraft leagues. Yeah. Is like the guy you would take in 6th round seems like such a bad value because you would take him in the 9th, but the guy you take in the 9th round seems like such a good value because you would take him in the 6th. There's that big mid-late round tier that you would just take any of them in any round, so it doesn't really matter when you take them.
One situation that is actually very interesting is we see Aaron Jones cut, replaced by Josh Jacobs, and now Aaron Jones is a Minnesota Viking. They had already cut Alexander Mattison. They moved on from him. Ty Chandler saw a little bit of a ADP boost when there was the perception that he could win the job. It never was going to happen. Now Aaron Jones lands okay. We had this conversation on the phone, Alan, and Dallas would have been a better landing spot. Baltimore would have been a better landing spot. Houston would have been a better landing spot. Staying in Green Bay would have been a better landing spot. But again, he sort of regains a little bit of value there. What are we supposed to think about Aaron Jones here in Minnesota? Is this a player that you want pieces of as you get to draft season?
How you feel about Aaron Jones depends on how badly you feel about Sam Darnold, right? Because
why don't you take that? How do you feel about Sam Darnold as a 1-year stopgap?
Yeah, I feel like Sam Darnold is probably right in the same tier as Case Keenum when he had the keys to the Minnesota car, right? And by your reaction, I'm guessing you say that they're chasms apart. Like, I don't know, Sam Darnold. Go ahead, Theo.
None of them excite me. I mean, the Sam Darnold situation is
at least he's competent. Like he could run. He's a professional NFL quarterback.
I'll give you that. Darnold's a professional NFL quarterback, and can Sam Darnold support Justin Jefferson and keep him afloat? Yes, I believe so. I think that Sam Darnold certainly, wide receiver 2, Jordan Addison will take a hit. Darnold can support his number 1 target and keep Jefferson at a somewhat elite level. I do think that there's a real need in the building in Minnesota to draft one of these guys this year and have a potential Drake May in the building, a Jaden Daniels or a JJ McCarthy. They pick 11th overall, so they're close enough to that range that they could potentially get one of these guys. And now I think the pressure is on them to do so because it's just, you can't lose Kirk Cousins and have Sam Darnold be an entire year stopgap. You need to have a little bit more of an answer than that. So for me, it's Aaron Jones is a slight downgrade from where I would have valued him in Green Bay, but still a guy that's based on his talent, based on what we've seen from him. He's still a guy that I'm comfortable with as a RB20. Let's call him RB20.
And he's gonna be playing indoor in the dome, and he does everything. Aaron Jones. I mean, look what he did in the NFL playoffs. He can catch passes, right? He can go out on routes. Christian McCaffrey, and again, you don't want to compare any running back to Christian McCaffrey, but when he played with Darnold, it was fine, right? Yeah. I mean, he was still afloat. Aaron Jones, I think he'll be a little undervalued because I think the market will hate Sam Darnold because he's failed in a couple spots, but last year, who was the very first free agent signed? It was Sam Darnold, right? The 49ers proactively felt like, hey, if all goes wrong and we have to pull the parachute, Theo, we are going to pull. It's going to be Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold now is no longer in the, hey, I'm a top 3 NFL pick expectations. He's now like, hey, I'm Andy Dalton. I'm Jacoby Brissett. I'm a guy that can at least keep things together as long as the conditions around me are okay. And Aaron Jones adds another piece of comfort to him.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one. Let's go and stay in the NFC North, and let's go with Aaron Jones's previous home. We're talking about Josh Jacobs. This is one of the more exciting landing spots for me, where Josh Jacobs, they're willing to move on from Aaron Jones, who has been a highly productive running back for them for many years, a very popular player, and a player that we would have expected a lot of. Like you said, Aaron Jones had back-to-back 100-yard games in the NFL playoffs, played a very high level. They go with Josh Jacobs, who we saw lead the NFL in rushing yards in 2022. This is a player that has never finished lower than RB 18 in PPR points per game. He now joins an offense that is full of youth and seems to be trending upwards. I'm super excited about Josh Jacobs in Green Bay this year. Where are you at on him, Alan?
Yeah, Josh Jacobs is a 3rd-round pick in our redraft leagues, right? He's basically back to being in a world where running backs are only year-to-year propositions. He's now at least a 2-year proposition, possibly a 3rd, because he came into the league so young, Theo. He was like 20 years old, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and now he's in a great situation. I mean, people are going to be very optimistic about him. You want him on your team. I traded him away in a long-term keeper league 2 years ago for Chris Olave. I'm not so sure I won that trade today, right? I mean, I know I won it last year or the year before, but I'm not so sure I won it today. He's going to be there's so few running backs that you could feel good about, and especially if you're picking early in your redraft league, when you go for Tyreek Hill or CeeDee Lamb or Justin Jefferson, you don't want to take McCaffrey. He's the perfect player to get on that 2-3 turn, and preferably the 3 part of that 2-3 turn.
Yeah, which is kind of about he was living in that 3-4 turn this past season,
right?
And the market really adjusted on him. I think the market's going to be more enthusiastic about him this year. Let's just do a little bit of rapid fire. Josh Jacobs or Kenneth Walker?
Oh, Jacobs.
Jacobs easily.
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs or Rashad White? Jacobs for me.
Yeah, Jacobs for, and again, Rashad. If you end up with Rashad White as your consolation prize, it's not a big deal.
Okay, we have to react to the new landing spots for both of these guys. You showed a lot of enthusiasm for Derrick Henry. Josh Jacobs on Green Bay or Derrick Henry in Baltimore?
Yeah, I mean this is the best one that you came up with right here. I'm still going to go with Derrick. I'm going to go with Derrick Henry here, but I do not believe the market is even going to be anywhere close on these guys. I mean, Derrick Henry is going to be a full round later.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on the market, and I think I would disagree with you. I think I would go Jacobs because I think Jacobs is also going to be targeted out of the backfield. They're not going to have to change stylistically in terms of what they do. We've seen Jacobs have 2 50-catch seasons in his last 3 played. I think he'll have another one this year in Green Bay. Yeah. Let's take it up to the good offenses here. James Cook and Isaiah Pacheco or Josh Jacobs?
So meaning like you want me to compare those 3 guys?
Well, would either one of those guys be drafted ahead of Josh Jacobs for you, James Cook or Isaiah Pacheco?
Right. I would take Jacobs there, more locked into the 3-down role at any point. Any of those other, I don't trust James Cook. I think that's really what it comes down to. I guess I should be trusting James Cook a little bit, but Josh Allen still, quasi goal line back there. James Cook, you're hoping he gets it done with some of the other elements, between the 20s. So absolutely Josh Jacobs. I mean, Josh Jacobs, I think you can make the case, Theo, is RB 9, 10, or 11. I mean, that you can make that. And right now he's still, his ADP is still adjusting. So it's going to take him a minute to get up there. He's right around 13. But, when you go from 13 to 11, you think like, oh, that's not a big deal. But when you're at the top of the rankings, that is a big deal because it's like a half a round move up.
Yeah, and I'll throw out Travis Etienne versus Josh Jacobs. Where are you at on that one? Because I think that's probably my cutoff where I would go with Etienne over Jacobs.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Etienne. But, there is some, offseason chatter, which, by the way, just that term offseason chatter should be X'd out, that they want to try to get another running back involved. And in the end of the season for Travis Etienne is a little bit scary there. So if somebody said they liked Jacobs a little bit better because he's had, longer sustained success in the NFL as far as like whole seasons, I wouldn't have any problem with that.
Joe Mixon goes from being cut, and then actually we didn't cut him. We traded him to Houston. Huge swing, emotional swing for dynasty managers and early best ball drafters. Mixon was highly productive last year in Cincinnati, had a really, really strong fantasy run as a Bengal. Now ends up on a really good offense, the Houston Texans, probably in the Devin Singletary role, maybe a Devin Singletary role plus. How should we be valuing Joe Mixon in a new situation? Is this a player that you want to shares of, or one that you sort of want to avoid because he's old? We don't really know how he'll fit in.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lateral move, right? Both good quarterbacks when you had Burrow, who was out for most of the season, and you have CJ Stroud. So now Mixon's a year older. Everyone's kind of, nobody really loved Joe Mixon. It was like a pick you just made. Always probably a little overvalued in fantasy. I think it's a lateral move. It just keeps him afloat in that, RB 11 to 15 mix. I'm happy to take him. I'm not reaching up to get him, and he landed in a good spot. They'll probably, you can't give Joe Mixon 25 carries for 17 games. Somebody else will be involved there, whether it's Dameon Pierce or they bring in someone else, or a day 3 running back. There's a bunch of good ones there.
Yeah, and I think that's he could be a bridge running back for a running back that they draft this draft. And I think that 3rd round might be in play, Alan, just because they didn't really give up a lot to get Joe Mixon, and Dameon Pierce is not a guy that they're paying a lot. I feel like they could look at this draft as a chance to get their long-term running back solution. That's definitely one to circle, and I think one that would be a positive landing spot. Austin Eckler.
I was just going to ask you, what if Deontay Foreman also comes back to the Texans, right? You could easily see that happening. They signed Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, anyone they sign at this point, Joe Mixon's going to be the lead, but he's not going to be a 70%er. He's going to be like a 55%er.
Is Ramondre Stevenson a loser based on the Antonio Gibson signing when we try to find winners and losers? Stevenson's the only, like last year, is the only New England Patriot that anybody's really banking on. He's going right around RB 19 on Underdog. They go ahead and they sign a 25-year-old Antonio Gibson who's had more than 170 receptions as a pro. I don't like it at all for Ramondre Stevenson. We talked about this on the phone. For me, Ramondre Stevenson is a loser here because for Ramondre Stevenson to kind of return value in any format, he's got to be utilized as a receiver out of the backfield. It sounds like they're excited to get Antonio Gibson. They targeted Antonio Gibson. Am I wrong on this? Is Stevenson a guy that you still want to have pieces of?
And if they take Jaden Daniels at pick 3, or now you're talking about another goal line threat. I'm going to throw the question back to you in this sense, Theo. Who's a bigger threat or bigger anchor on the fantasy value of Ramondre Stevenson? Is it Zeke? Or is it Antonio Gibson? If you think Antonio Gibson is more of a threat, then yes, this sinks the value. I happen to think is that Zeke was a bigger threat because he does it all. He catches passes. He's trusted in pass blocking. He gets goal line. So I think that because Antonio Gibson has not really quote, done it yet, and he's a converted running back from a receiver, yeah, he's a good, nice athletic player, but I don't think he poses a threat. So where do you feel, which former back or, Zeke or Gibson, who is the bigger threat to Tim Stevenson?
Based on the current situation in Dallas with Bill Belichick out of there, I do think Antonio Gibson is the bigger threat because it's they're trying to kind of reshape their team. And, of course, they're bringing back Hunter Henry. They're bringing back Kendrick Bourne. So not really reshaping anything. But you do bring up Jaden Daniels. And Antonio Gibson, they bring in a 25-year-old back. Bill Belichick always seemed to have sort of a veteran's deference, and Zeke Elliott was a guy that he really wanted to bring in. Those massive Zeke Elliott outbursts, like we think about that Pittsburgh game where he scored 30 PPR points last year, that was with Ramondre Stevenson sidelined. I think Antonio Gibson can be a threat to Stevenson every week, and it can be a little bit more of a split. Gibson's a guy that we were really excited about in fantasy football, and he's sort of fallen off a little bit the last 18 months or so. But this is a guy that, for a while, there was a one season where we steamed him up to the 1-2 turn in redraft, and he was a guy that gained a ton of dynasty value. I think that those days are over, but he could be a guy that could kind of be an interesting weekly play again in New England on a team that's kind of devoid of pass catchers, devoid of offensive weapons. Gibson's a very good athlete and, by all accounts, a very productive receiver out of the backfield. So I don't like it at all for Stevenson.
They were calling Antonio Gibson the next Christian McCaffrey 4 years ago.
I know. And Ron Rivera did not hurt that hype. We had the Ron Rivera given a couple of quotes, and then Gibson fumbled twice, and Rivera's forget it. Forget everything I said. Just you eat your draft pick. That
comparison is almost as bad as Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf. That's the chasm between those two players.
Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe even wider.
Even wider.
Right. So we know Kirk Cousins signed in Atlanta. Massive. We can both agree that Cousins is going to be what he usually is. Let's call him a guy that could give you low QB1 production.
QB8 overall.
Cap ceiling, though. Like you take him, like you know what you're getting in him. A guy who's going to pass for a lot of yards, complete a lot of passes. Last year, he was leading the NFL in touchdown passes. But Alan, my question for you is, what does this do for the pass catching weapons in Atlanta, namely Drake London? And just to preface this, Drake London is currently being drafted as wide receiver 33 overall on Underdog. We're talking about wide receiver 23. It feels like a massive correction is coming where Drake London is going to pass by the let's call it the Jalen Waddle, DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman, Mike Evans, Tank Dell, Chris Olave tier. How high do you think Drake London ends up?
Yeah, I mean, Drake London was already a proactive pick for me. Like I was pushing people out of the way to go get him. There's very few guys I do that. I just let the draft fall to me. We're assuming Kirk Cousins is going to play week 1, right? I mean, yeah. Drake London is a fringe first-round pick in redraft. I mean, look what Kirk Cousins did for Justin Jefferson. Every year, there's a player that's sitting around the 4th or 5th round that gets shoved into the elite tier. It happens every year. Cooper Kupp, the year that he had that crazy season, Theo, he was a 4th-round pick. Robert Woods was going ahead of Cooper Kupp that year. Drake London is in that spot this year. He was going in the 4th. We know he's going to move up to the 3rd round minimum, right?
Yeah.
Because of the optimism. I have no problem jumping ADP here, and if I'm picking on the 1-2 turn, and I'm looking at players like A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, we talked about a couple of the running backs. So, I mean, at this point, Drake London, to me, I would take him that high and not even worry about it. So I would say he's in play on that 1-2 turn. The market's going to get there, and if Kirk Cousins is actually really healthy, that you can beat the value of that pick there. He was a top 10 real NFL pick, superstar. Everyone loves all the under the hood metrics on him. And now you give him a quarterback who's made a king out of Justin Jefferson. You could say Justin Jefferson is a king already, but you need someone to put that crown on your head. He's had D- C+ quarterbacking at best. Now he gets that B+ quarterback. This is that rocket fuel for Drake London for me.
I love it. I'm with you. I'll give you a couple of straight up head-to-head choices. Devontae Adams or Drake London?
London.
Brandon Ayuk or Drake London?
London.
Stephon Diggs or Drake London?
Oh my God, Stephon Diggs is
Rashee Rice.
This is where I have London right now. I would take him probably right above Garrett Wilson or AJ Brown. I would take him in my drafts as wide receiver 7. That's how bull. And I'm never like this with a player, just because but I already liked London, and now he gets exactly what you needed him to get. I would take him at the end of round 1 there with no problem whatsoever. We already talked about the problems with the Eagles and AJ Brown. One of them is not going to make value.
22 years old for Drake London. We have to keep reminding ourselves that. And he has 2 valuable years of experience in the NFL. He's the same age or younger. Like we talk about Ricky Pearsall, a guy we've been talking about as a prospect for this NFL draft class. Drake London's younger than Ricky Pearsall. Very interesting times.
Hey, Theo.
Younger than Xavier Legette.
This is the real question right now. Puka's sitting on your right. Are you as bullish on London as I am? And if you are, would you rather have London or Puka?
I'm super bullish. I think I would go Puka because I think we know that Puka Nacua, I think we saw him already have a highly targeted season where we saw him have, the 160 targets. I think it's a little bit more of a known commodity at this point. In terms of pure talent, though, Drake London, I think is a better talent. Certainly had a top 10 NFL overall draft capital. So yeah, I'm with you. That it's an absolute rocket ship. Thoughts quickly on Gardner Minshew in Vegas? Is this a player that it could be sneaky for fantasy football, or really just more of a stopgap?
Yeah, I mean, this is Jimmy Garoppolo from last year, right? But a little bit better. So it's clear at this point that the Raiders have taken the pressure off themselves. I'll be very quick here. They don't have to move up with pick 9, whatever they have at this point. They could just take whatever quarterback they like in the late first round if they move up, and then have that be the bridge right there. Yeah, Gardner Minshew, in our Superflex leagues. He's certainly going to be someone that I pick, but think of him similar to how you thought of those guys that, they have a month to prove that they get another month.
Who would you rather hang out with in Las Vegas for, like, let's say 2 nights and go out with? Jimmy Garoppolo or Gardner Minshew? Who would be more of a fun wingman for Alan Seslowsky?
Minshew, because I would not be able to pull the kind of tail that Jimmy Garoppolo.
What about the fall off? What about the fall off?
It would have to be, I mean, the type of women that Jimmy Garoppolo hangs out with, on their worst day, they wouldn't look at someone like me.
But Minshew, you think Minshew's like getting after it a little
fat
bit?
Chicks,
and all that?
fat chicks. Minshew's all in on the fat chicks. And that's, in that world, I'm Brad Pitt.
Love it. Let me give you one more. We should have ended on that note, but I got to get back to one thing we didn't cover. Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson. Who would you rather roster this coming season?
I think it's Brian Robinson, but the upside play is Eckler. I mean, Eckler did not look good at the end of last year, man. And now goes into a situation where it's dicey. So when the cliff comes, it comes hard right here. Brian Robinson is the safer pick, and he's a good player.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I would go Brian Robinson as well. Alan, let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, just follow me on the social media platform formerly known as Twitter, at Alan Seslowsky. Everything's there.
I love it. And stick with us here at Press Coverage. We got you covered all offseason. I have Heath Cummings of CBS coming on Dynasty Life on Wednesday. Check out the episode of Sonic Truth that Alan and I recorded with Cody Carpenter earlier in the week. We're everywhere here at
great adult film star name, by the way, for him.
I will not let him know that you said that, Alan. But Heath is a really, really good Dynasty
smart
analyst guy.
Smart
guy. Really, really smart guy. Alan Seslowsky, make sure you're following him. Make sure you're checking out his work at RotoWire. And stick with us here at Player Profiler. We got you covered all throughout NFL free agency, all throughout the rookie draft season. We got you covered on everything. We will see you soon.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.